The room smelled like citrus-scented betrayal. Rachel sat across from her manager, Jenna, the human equivalent of a LinkedIn motivational post, who was flipping through pages of her performance review like she was auditioning for a daytime soap. "Technically, your work is flawless," Jenna said, hesitating just long enough for the dagger. "But we've noticed your culture engagement is a bit underdeveloped." Rachel blinked. "Culture engagement?" "Yes," Jenna beamed, sipping her oat milk chai like it was laced with delusion. "You're not posting enough positive affirmations on Thrive On. You haven't logged a single team selfie in 3 months, and your vibe congruency score is 27%. Rachel stared at her, deadpan. "Is that fatal?" Jenna didn't laugh. Instead, she slid a laminated pamphlet across the table titled "Energize Your Inner Sparkle," with a cartoon unicorn doing yoga. Rachel had once rebooted the company's entire back-end infrastructure with nothing but a corrupted Docker image and a cup of gas station coffee. And now, she was being rated on glitter metrics and emoji frequency. Around this point, if you're enjoying Rachel's descent into this flavor of corporate absurdity and want to see how deep the rabbit hole of revenge goes, it'd mean the world if you hit subscribe. Help me reach my first 10,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you more stories like this one. No toxic positivity required, just good old-fashioned chaos. Back in the room, Rachel tried not to hyperventilate. "So let me get this straight," she said. "I mitigated a 0-day exploit, trained 2 junior engineers, optimized our load balancing logic, and my bonus depends on how many smiley faces I slap on a dashboard." "Exactly," Jenna chirped. "It's about your energy. People need to feel your vibe." Rachel's vibe at that moment was best described as existential dread mixed with professional homicide. But she didn't show it. She smiled, barely, noted. And that's when the real kicker dropped. The new initiative wasn't optional. Everyone would be required to log in to Thrive On daily. It tracked positive comments, virtual high fives, gratitude journals, your facial expressions during meetings using your webcam. Rachel's brain flatlined for 3 seconds. "Wait, is this legal?" Jenna giggled. "It's not surveillance, it's synergistic alignment. HR's term." By the end of the day, Rachel's inbox had exploded with Thrive On onboarding guides, a required webinar titled "Hacking Happiness in the Workplace," and a personalized dashboard already dinging her for low sparkle quotient. The algorithm had analyzed her Slack messages and found a 74% usage of which it flagged as emotionally neutral. She stared at the screen, her fingers twitching toward her keyboard like they were reaching for a weapon. But instead of lashing out, Rachel did what she always did: observe, adapt, log everything. By Friday, she was already bookmarking the codebase URL for the original version of Thrive On, when she had helped architect as a contractor before the company outsourced it to a Silicon Valley vendor with more brand decks than brains. She knew the framework better than HR knew how to spell ethics. Rachel wasn't stupid. She knew the writing was on the wall, and this time it was painted in pastel fonts and motivational puke. But she also knew something else. Thrive On still had a heartbeat she could tap into. She just had to wait for the right rhythm. The next Monday, the office looked less like an enterprise tech firm and more like the pastel aisle of a failing Hobby Lobby. Fake succulents lined every desk. The whiteboards no longer displayed sprint deadlines or firewall rules. They now shouted things like "smiles are contagious." In glitter marker, someone, Rachel suspected the new HR intern with the ukulele, had swapped the server room signage with a poster that read, "Breathe in tech, exhale synergy." 9 a.m., all hands no longer focused on quarterly targets or security incidents. Instead, it kicked off with gratitude circles, where employees were required to go around and say what they were thankful for. One poor developer, Chad from DevOps, said he was grateful for coffee. Jenna cut him off mid-sentence. "That's not emotionally rich enough, Chad. Try again." Rachel muttered, "Grateful I haven't hacked into the sprinkler system yet," which earned her a frown from someone logging team sentiment on an iPad. Then came the vibe breaks. Every day at 2 p.m., a Slack bot named Vibio popped up, demanding 5 positive engagements. You had to send compliments to colleagues, share an inspirational quote, or post a selfie with the caption, "Crushing it with my team." Failure to participate resulted in a temporary drop in your culture tier, rank that determined everything from lunch invitations to parking privileges. Rachel ignored the notification. She was knee-deep in diagnosing an anomaly in their database access logs, something that looked suspiciously like an exfiltration attempt from a deprecated API. The kind of thing that, if left unchecked, could leak customer PII and bring the company to its knees. By 4 p.m., she had isolated the breach path, patched the vulnerability, documented everything for the security team. She wiped her hands, cracked her knuckles, and leaned back, only to hear a chime from her desktop. It was a system alert, not from the security dashboard, from Thrive On. Rachel, your vibe score has dropped below 30%. Immediate action required. Beneath that was a gif of a frowning llama holding a sign, too much code, not enough joy. She closed the window. She thought that was the end of it, till her manager showed up at her desk. "Hey, Ratch," Jenna whispered like she was breaking the news of a family death. "I just wanted to let you know, your vibe points are dangerously low." Rachel slowly turned her chair. "I caught and contained a breach that could have exposed 1 million customer records." Jenna nodded, blinking like a motivational mannequin. "Yeah, but no one felt that. You didn't share the journey. You didn't bring the team along emotionally. I was busy containing an actual fire," Rachel said. "And we appreciate that," Jenna smiled, tapping a Thrive On sticker on her MacBook. "But metrics are holistic now. The board wants emotionally intelligent heroes." Rachel wondered, not for the first time, whether murder was still illegal in their state. That week, Rachel attended a vibe optimization workshop. She didn't speak. She sat in the back, doodling network topologies in her notebook, while a man in a tank top named River explained how to realign our chakras with quarterly goals. Meanwhile, her name was now visibly listed in the low vibe alert zone on the public Thrive On leaderboard. Every morning, she passed the leaderboard in the lobby. There it was, projected like a stock ticker. Red circle Rachel K, culture tier. Shadow lurker worried face one afternoon. Jenna posted a group selfie after their wellness walk around the parking lot. Rachel wasn't in it. She'd been rerouting the data logs from their IDS system. The caption read, "Teamwork makes the dream work." Sparkling Sun #grateful #thrive on a Thrive On algorithm flagged Rachel's absence and sent a nudge. "You missed a social moment. Consider engaging with team energy to restore congruency." She clicked dismiss so hard she nearly cracked her mouse. That night, eating dinner alone in her apartment, Rachel logged into the original Git repository from her old freelance archive. Buried in a long-abandoned folder named Fallback Utils, she found what she was looking for, a script tagged Override Cascade. Her fingers hovered over the code, then withdrew. Not yet. For now, she would play the game. But every smile forced, every vibe point she faked, every stupid motivational quote she had to upvote, she logged all of it. Every indignity, every microsurveillance tick, every empty platitude taped over real achievement. She wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. She was engineering it. 3 years ago, long before Thrive On became a tool of corporate gaslighting, Rachel was just another overworked freelance systems architect taking late-night gigs to pay down her mortgage and keep her cat in prescription food. Job had sounded straightforward at the time. Build a scalable engagement tracking prototype for internal use. Must be modular, GDPR compliant, and ready for eventual third-party handoff. She'd laughed at that last bit. Nothing like building digital handcuffs you don't get to hold the key to. Back then, the app wasn't called Thrive On. It had a boring dev name, PulseSync, and HR hadn't gotten their glitter-stained hands on it yet. It was just Rachel and a few contractors tossing code back and forth over a Slack channel named #Engagement Lab. The requirements were simple: track voluntary team activity, improve collaboration visibility, maybe reward people who were doing unseen support work. It wasn't toxic yet, just naive. But Rachel, who'd spent a career watching nice ideas get turned into productivity torture devices, had built in what she called a responsible detonation clause. A kill switch, not dramatic, not even meant as revenge, just insurance. A little protocol buried in the bonus evaluation records module that, if triggered, would cascade null values through the incentive tracking tree and corrupt the leaderboard engine. It was tied to a single metric. If the original system administrator, her, received a bonus evaluation below a specific threshold, the app would collapse in on itself. Back then, she'd built it half out of spite, half out of instinct. Companies changed, apps got rebranded, intent got hijacked. She didn't trust what came after her hands were off the controls. She just didn't expect this, Thrive unmutated into a corporate Black Mirror episode with a pastel color palette and serotonin quotas. Rachel leaned back from her terminal and lit the emergency candle she kept near her desk, not out of spirituality, but because her apartment's overhead lights flickered like they were coded by interns. The flame danced across her face as she stared at the old source files, now archived and mostly untouched. The override script was still there. Kill Protocol V4, SH. She remembered the night she wrote it. A 3 a.m. Red Bull haze. Just gotten an email from some VP requesting that Pulse Sync add facial sentiment mapping based on webcam angle and eye crinkle detection. That was the moment Rachel realized exactly where this project would go and decided to leave behind a dead man's switch. The code was elegant, simple, dangerous. It wouldn't just crash the app, it would scramble the SmilePoint database, poison the analytics API, turn every user's engagement graph into abstract noise. It wouldn't expose personal data. She wasn't a monster, but it would short-circuit Thrive on's HR backend, making any performance metric based on its outputs unusable in legal or professional reviews. She whispered aloud, "They made me build a social panopticon in a hoodie." Her cat meowed in agreement from the windowsill. Rachel moved the override file to her active archive, crypting it with a passphrase only she would understand. The exact percentile her bonus had dropped to last year, 38%. Then she closed the terminal. Hands off, not yet. The thought of pushing it felt like holding a match over a puddle of gasoline with just enough self-respect to keep from flicking it. Because if she did this, really did this, she wasn't just nuking an app. She was declaring war. HR wouldn't just recover from the chaos. Hunt for her name in every log file, every changelog, every digital shadow. So instead, she poured herself a glass of boxed red wine and opened Slack, responding to a thread about Friday's mandatory vibe and Vine afterwork paint night with a smiley face and a thumbs up. She even added a hashtag, #feelingconnected. The sarcasm tasted better than the wine. And deep in a folder marked legacy contracted modules, a string of code waited in silence. Patient, obedient, lethal. The unraveling began with the smiles. At first, they were too wide, too toothy. Employees walked around with the frozen grins of airline flight attendants during turbulence. Whole departments became Stepford zones, eye contact just a second too long, laughter a beat too late, Slack emojis deployed like flare guns. Rachel watched it all from behind her glasses, silent and grim, like a scientist observing a failing biosphere. During one of the new Thrive on Pulse huddles, a 20-minute standing meeting with no agenda except to connect authentically, a junior dev named Priya burst into tears while trying to explain how she was grateful for micro moments of synergy. She sobbed, apologized, then got pulled into a quiet realignment chat with Jenna. By Monday, her desk was cleared. The next week, Derek from Analytics, once built a predictive churn model so accurate it spooked the CFO, got flagged for vibe toxicity. His offense, leaving a Thrive on comment thread with 0 reaction emojis. He tried to defend himself by pointing out he was deep in client migration work. HR reminded him that all work is emotional. By Friday, Derek's ID badge stopped working. Rachel noticed the pattern forming like mold in a forgotten Tupperware. High performers out, ood mascots in. She kept her head down, but she didn't unplug. She logged, documented, archived. She watched coworkers crumble under quotas for joy engagements. People started carrying ring lights in their bags to artificially brighten their Zoom expressions. The company Slack added a bot that recommended GIFs when your messages seemed melancholic. But the final insult, the one that made her mouth go dry with quiet fury, came on a Wednesday at exactly 3:42 p.m. She was called into a video meeting with Jenna and 2 HR reps whose names she barely recognized, except for their matching pastel cardigans and identical ceramic "you got this" mugs. "Rachel," Jenna began, "all teeth and sparkle filters. This isn't a correction, it's an opportunity. You've been considered for the system's lead role, but after a holistic vibe assessment, you've chosen someone better aligned with Thrive on's culture evolution." Rachel didn't speak. She waited. "We're thrilled to announce that Ashley from Facilities, she started the Lunch Yoga Circle, will be taking the role. She's demonstrated cross-functional warmth and initiated 3 viral gratitude campaigns." Rachel blinked once. "She can't read a bash log. Let's not reduce people to their functions," one of the HR reps said gently. Rachel turned off her camera mid-meeting. She didn't rage, didn't rant. She sat back in her chair and stared at the wall of Post-its that used to track service tickets, now replaced with sarcastic quotes from her coworkers like "I live to vibe another day," and today's meltdown was sponsored by Thrive on Trademark. The bonus email came 2 days later. Subject: Annual Bonus Update Body. Dear Rachel, as part of our restructured incentive model, reflecting not just results, but emotional contribution, your bonus has been adjusted to reflect holistic engagement metrics. Adjustment, minus 62% reason, invisible contributions to morale. Keep thriving, rainbow, she read it once. Then again. Then a third time. She didn't move, not right away. Her face didn't twitch. But her eyes, behind thick black glasses, glazed over with a silence too heavy to be calm, was the look of someone watching a controlled burn and considering the wind direction. That night, she stayed late. The office was empty except for her and a few ferns someone had moved in for oxygen synergy. She ran diagnostics on the Thrive on backend from a mirrored sandbox she'd quietly spun up months ago. Not to destroy anything. Not yet. Just to know how deep the roots had grown. She found Ashley's new credentials. No surprise, they had admin privileges. Found entries showing Slack DMs being indexed for sentiment. Keystroke delay metrics. A new module called Mood Predictor, feeding directly into promotion review packets. Rachel stared at the terminal like it had slapped her. Then she opened her own Thrive on engagement log and read the breakdown of her contributions. It had evaluated one of her emails as low sparkle because she used the phrase "unfortunately." The server crashed. The algorithm flagged it as pessimism. She closed her laptop, walked into the break room, took a single cookie from the share and care tray, and smiled, not the fake, HR-mandated kind. The quiet, dangerous kind that doesn't reach the eyes. They wanted invisible morale. She would show them what invisible could really do. The breach didn't start with a firewall. It started with a typo. Rachel was combing through one of the mirrored logs from her sandboxed instance of Thrive on when she noticed an unusual API call, something labeled Stream Capture Mirror. It shouldn't have been there. The original codebase she'd written never included anything with persistent capture access. But this call was logging something far more invasive: active typing sentiment, not messages, the way messages were typed. She stared as the data streamed: keypress delays, backspace frequency, emotional inference models layered over typing rhythm. One entry read, "User, Camilla W. message, I'll look into it." Sentiment confidence, passive-aggressive, low enthusiasm flag level, mild dissonance action recommended. Soft feedback via vibe coach trademark. Rachel nearly dropped her glass. They weren't just scoring tone, they were building emotional dossiers. She ran a recursive grep on log behavior for the past 60 days. What returned made her stomach knot. Private Slack DMs flagged for negativity. Browser tab telemetry, tracking non-aligned content. Even Bluetooth beacon logs cross-referenced with time spent in high-energy zones like the meditation room or the juice bar. No one had consented to this. Not explicitly. Not even in the small print of the HR onboarding doc, which she checked and rechecked. Thrive On was pulling private behaviors into its smile machine and churning out punitive scores in silence. The company had quietly implemented surveillance, disguised as synergy. Rachel began collecting. She didn't just download logs. She took full-resolution screenshots of the backend dashboards, timestamped activity reports, snippets of admin emails talking about off-platform alignment behaviors, even found a Slack exchange between two HR managers debating whether someone's use of the skull emoji during a meme exchange should be considered a cultural risk. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was prosecution-grade material. On Thursday, while refilling her coffee in the break room, a coworker named Ben leaned over, eyes darting like he was dodging cameras. "You didn't hear it from me," he whispered, "but I got flagged last week." For what? For insufficient emoji use. I was told it could affect my mid-year review. Rachel raised an eyebrow. They said it suggested low relational commitment. Ben added, defeated, "My girlfriend thinks I'm having a breakdown. I can't tell her it's over emojis." Rachel nodded slowly, memorizing his words like evidence. How many? Under 5 per day. Minimum is now 8, and they have to be diverse. Can't repeat the same one too often, or you get flagged for emotional automation. She blinked. What the hell does that even mean? Ben shrugged. Ask Vibe Coach, or don't. It logs those questions too. He walked away before anyone could see them talking too long. Rachel stood alone by the coffee machine, steam rising beside her like a ghost of reason trying to escape. Later that night, in her apartment, zipped a file folder labeled Evidence-01 and stored it on a cold USB stick hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of the Phoenix Project on her bookshelf. She wasn't just documenting anymore. She was building a failsafe, a case, a detonator wrapped in truth. Her screen pinged. Another Thrive on notification. Daily Pulse Summary, your engagement dipped today. Remember to breathe and celebrate small wins. Glowing flexed Rachel didn't react. She didn't blink. She didn't scream. She just opened a terminal and ran a test. Trigger protocol sh dry run. The output came back clean. The architecture held. One more line, uncommented, and the whole false cathedral of smiles and spyware would fall. But she wasn't ready yet. No, this wasn't some knee-jerk revenge play anymore. This was moral clarity. And like all things Rachel built, it would be clean, untraceable, and irreversible. Friday morning came wearing a suit of silence. No Slack memes, no chirpy Thrive on nudges, just a dense, humming quiet like the office itself sensed what Rachel had done the night before. At 2:14 a.m., while the rest of her team slept off their wellness smoothies and vibe circles, Rachel had rewritten the kill switch. It no longer required her manual launch. No login, no password, no ceremonial key turn. Now it listened. Specifically, listened to the bonus distribution matrix that HR updated every quarter. Buried in the JSON payloads from the compensation server was a field labeled PCT Delta Edge, the percentage difference between last year's bonus and this year's. If her number ever dropped below the new baseline, 35% to be precise, the system would consider that an act of corporate erasure and respond accordingly. The script was quiet. It sat coiled like a venomous algorithm in a folder marked Old Contracts, renamed with the most boring title she could think of. Budget Recon 2018 Archive. It would check the compensation API once a day at 3:00 a.m. sharp. If the threshold hit, it would trigger a cascade of null returns across all active Thrive on sentiment objects, energy interactions, emoji depth scores, culture badge rankings, all poisoned by a recursive time bomb in the index weights. Rachel didn't bother encrypting it again. No one was looking. No one ever looked at the bones of the machine they danced on. She saved her resignation letter that same night, drafted with surgical precision. No emotion, no long goodbye, just a bullet-pointed list of systems handed off, final dates, and a footnote offering continued support during the transition phase, if deemed mutually respectful. File was titled Farewell DocX. It sat on her desktop, untouched, glowing faintly like a landmine. At work, she began radiating what Jenna called a beautiful stillness. In reality, it was a loaded gun placed on a table, wrapped in a napkin. Rachel joined every morning huddle, smiled when prompted, nodded with such neutral perfection it became eerie. She gave a full 10/10 on the daily gratitude index when Thrive on asked how she was feeling. One coworker whispered that she'd finally bought into the culture. She hadn't bought in, she was cashing out. Jenna noticed the shift. "You've been so present lately," she said during a check-in, her eyes darting like a pigeon at a picnic. "You're really embracing the Thrive on model. It's beautiful." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "I've come to understand its true purpose." Jenna beamed. "Yes. Yes, exactly. That's so empowering." Rachel nodded, mouth curling into a crescent of professional serenity. "It is." What Jenna didn't know was that every vibe-positive action Rachel took now served two purposes. One, to maintain cover, and two, to overload her profile with such artificial cheer that any future HR review would look like a Hallmark hallucination. When the system collapsed, Rachel wanted her name to be covered in so many gold stars and gratitude notes that no one would dare call her bitter. It was becoming the ghost of corporate optimism, and behind her was a fuse, unlit but shortening by the hour. That evening, Rachel shut down her terminal, walked past the Thrive on leaderboard where her name now glowed in the top tier as a Harmony steward, and nodded at her reflection in the lobby glass. The building lights flickered once, just once. Rachel smiled, not like before. This time it reached her eyes. The trap was set. The wire was taut. The bait had been swallowed. Now all she needed was the next bonus cycle. The email arrived at 12:03 a.m. Subject: 2025 bonus adjustment notification confidential. Rachel read it once, standing barefoot in her kitchen, drinking lukewarm wine straight from the bottle. The message was short, cold, cowardly. Dear Rachel, due to ongoing budget constraints and a necessary recalibration of culture alignment metrics, our annual bonus has been adjusted to reflect our evolving values-based incentive structure. Final bonus award, 3%. Thank you for continuing to embody the thrive on spirit. Keep glowing. Glowing star sincerely, People Operations. There was no breakdown of figures. No mention of the project she salvaged in Q2, the overtime she clocked with no complaint, the breach she caught that should have had a plaque in the break room, culture alignment, and a glittering emoji like a sticker over a gunshot wound. Rachel didn't blink, didn't hit reply, didn't scream or cry or fire off a storm of rage-fueled messages. She just exhaled, soft, precise, like a sniper. Because the moment that email hit her inbox, the trigger lit, silently, invisibly. A demon ran at 3:00 a.m. as always. It checked the bonus threshold. 3% bonus. 35% expected. Delta equals 91.4% condition. True, the system nodded to itself. Within milliseconds, the thrive on backend began folding in on itself like a dying star. At 9:07 a.m., Jenna entered the building humming something vaguely inspirational and was immediately greeted by chaos. Slack threads were erupting. Thrive On's dashboards were returning error. Null object ID. Leaderboards showed nothing but blood-red X's. Harmony heatmap had turned into a pixelated void, with every department showing dead zone in flashing amber. Then the private feedback streams, anonymous psychological nudges, HR whisper logs, mood-tagged performance notes, leaked into open Slack channels. Not names, not direct quotes, but enough. A senior manager's feed posted, subject, likely depressive, poor lunch engagement, excessive sarcasm during stand-ups recommended for exit strategy Q3. 10 minutes later, someone else's log triggered, flagged for emotionally neutral interaction with team birthday event lacks synergistic empathy. By 10:30, PR was called in. By 10:45, the CEO's assistant was seen crying in the stairwell, phone to her ear, whispering, "No, I don't know what a cascade null attack is, Dad. I work in recruiting." Every thrive on integration, payroll syncs, performance reviews, badge gamification, collapsed into chaos. Hundreds of culture points invalidated. Automated HR workflows looping infinitely, sending employees dozens of contradictory emails. "You are a culture hero," followed seconds later by "You are on culture probation." The lunchroom was silent, except for the sound of an espresso machine and one intern asking quietly, "Are we allowed to feel anything right now?" Rachel sat at her desk, being out a perfectly polite project status update. She wore her badge. She smiled when spoken to. She complimented a colleague's socks. Her screen flashed. A Slack message from Jenna, "Hey Ratch, just a heads up, Thrive On's having a weird morning. Hope it's not affecting your workflow." Rachel typed back, calm and clipped, "Not at all. I'm feeling extremely aligned today." No emoji. No exclamation point. Just the truth. Because Rachel wasn't angry anymore. It was finished. By Monday morning, the headline was everywhere from LinkedIn to the front page of Tech Culture Daily. Wellness app breach at major firm exposes internal surveillance, psychological scoring, and bonus manipulation. It wasn't just a glitch anymore. It was a story. Screenshots circulated, redacted Thrive on reports showing mood flags tied to raised decisions. Tagged conversations rated emotional volatility risk. One file even showed backend sentiment analysis cross-referenced with menstrual cycle trackers employees had opted into during Wellness Week. The outrage came fast, feral, and fully caffeinated. By noon, employees were staging what Slack dubbed the digital sit-in. Every department renamed their channels #I am not a vibe score. Someone changed the company wiki homepage to a single line of code. While alive, smile. By 2 p.m., 2 senior HR officers were temporarily relieved of duty pending external audit. Jenna tried to send out a reassuring all-hands invite. Only 4 people showed up. One of them was clearly asleep. Legal calls started flooding the executive floor. Privacy compliance officers were pulled from their Peloton breaks and slammed into boardrooms. IT ran in circles trying to identify the root cause. The Thrive on vendor team denied everything until someone traced the API cascade to a legacy override buried in the original architecture, backdated to 3 years ago. No one said Rachel's name, but they were thinking it. Meanwhile, Rachel got a calendar invite for her mandatory exit interview to be completed, ironically, via Thrive On. She clicked the link. Page not found. Shut her laptop with the kind of quiet satisfaction that belongs to people who have been underestimated too long, and finally get to walk away with clean hands and a burning skyline behind them. On Thursday, she walked into a small, sunlit office across town. Neutral tones, real coffee, no wellness pod, no scent diffusers huffing citrus guilt into the air. Just a CTO with a bad haircut and a whiteboard covered in actual work. He shook her hand. Just need someone who gets systems. Not feelings, just infrastructure. Rachel smiled, soft this time, real that I can do. He pointed her toward her new desk. No Thrive On, no app, no vibe score, just a terminal waiting patiently for its user. As she booted up the system, she glanced once out the window toward her old company's tower. Glass and steel and glittering nonsense. They'd survive. Companies like that always did, but they'd do it without her silence, without her code, without her compliance. Rachel leaned back, cracked her knuckles, and began to type. No sparkle points, no affirmation badges, just control, finally hers. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.